And we're live.
Awesome.
Garrett, how are you?
Doing fantastic, Logan. How about yourself?
I'm well, thanks. I
Great.
appreciate you cutting out some time from your schedule to connect with me today.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. 100%.
What are we here to discuss in your
Yeah.
view?
So today we're going to have just kind of a free flow conversation, diving into a little bit of lead gen, a little bit of LinkedIn, a little bit of sales talk in general. But overall, just, kind of two guys chatting and sharing their experiences and hoping to provide some value to those listening.
Having had the pleasure of working with you for a number of months now, I know that you're bringing value is something that's guaranteed. If you've not seen any of Garrett's materials online, he's his online presence is very strong. This gentleman has a masterful grasp of cold outreach and building relations through professional channels. So one of the things that actually brought Garrett to my radar originally was his ability to represent himself in a very authentic and accessible manner online and doing that at scale. So my hope for this video is uh, that you as the viewer will gain insight and value from this organic conversation. Garrett and I have grown a friendship and I've collaborated on a number of projects over the last quarter that have rendered a lot of value to us both. But I think that my hope is that for the viewer, the insights into Garrett's realm of expertise will help you move the needle. And that would be my thinking to summarize what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. Very well spoken. Completely agree and appreciate the kind words. 100%.
You got it. Garrett, to know where you're going or even where you're at, it's helpful to know where you've been.
Yeah.
I think maybe a good way to start would be to share some of the origin story and
Yeah.
where you've come from to get to the place that you're at now.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back all the way to my first corporate experience, I'd say. Actually, even before that, one of my first jobs was working at a wine bar. I was a server, and it was an amazing experience. Meeting new people, all different walks of life, getting to chat with them, getting to know them. Had a great time with a lot of my friends and coworkers, and overall, just really loved that fast-paced sales environment. A lot of unpredictability in it, and realized that I wanted to begin to focus my career more on the relationship side and really just and turn the sales side of things. So, first corporate gig right out of college, graduated during COVID, and went into a remote position selling point of sale hardware and software. So, doing a lot of cold calling then, a little bit of list building, but mainly that was my first kind of taste of corporate. And it was a little hit or miss to some degree. I had definitely learned a lot, made some good relationships, but don't know if I really fully supported that kind of structure. So my next role was a little more hybrid in terms of kind of like a 1099, almost mixed with a little bit of corporate. So I had started my own uh, Amazon e-commerce brand. So I sold some footrests, some armrests, and I thought, hey, it'd be a great idea to learn more about Amazon. At the same time, practice my sales skills. So I ended up finding a pretty much perfect position that was doing sales for an Amazon agency. So I was reaching out to larger brands on the platform, having a quick chat with them, and then, seeing if they wanted to hop on a quick call to learn more about our services, kind of what we do, and overall just gather some more information. So I think that was a great synergistic relationship for me to develop my skills. And I call my Amazon experience my entrepreneur university. So learned a lot of lessons. Didn't turn out exactly how I wanted it to, but it allowed me to make some calibrated decisions to take me where I am today. Now, still, I had the same feeling for my first role at this Amazon agency. I was putting in 40, 60, and even 70 hours some weeks working on proposals over the weekend, doing sales messaging. And for the most part, I would have a decent commission, but my pay structure stayed relatively the same. So I was thinking to myself, I'm putting in so much time, like I'm not really seeing even an equal return, let alone an exponential return on things that I'm doing. And that was my main goal. Um, Really, the core things for me that I'm aiming for is time, location, and financial freedom. And I wanted to look for a way to do that while providing value for others and creating expansion in their lives. Uh, so on the note of the Amazon agency, that was the first time I had an experience with LinkedIn. So again, reaching out to a lot of professionals, larger brands, and I was doing mainly lead generation around that space. And I realized it was very inefficient process. I was spending probably 4 hours a day doing sending out connection requests and doing just some initial follow up, which really wasn't the meat of what I needed to be doing. Having those conversations, getting to know these people, moving them down the pipeline. So, I was thinking, has to be a better way to do this. Ended up coming across some automation software. And in the beginning, definitely don't think I was using it responsibly. I was definitely kind of sending it out there and sending pitches and just saying, hey, like we can talk about this and that and really focus on myself and what I wanted and my goals. But very quickly learned that wasn't going to fly. So I started to adapt and iterate in my process and really, um, over the time, learning about relationships and sales in general, really started to put the focus on the person I was talking to, genuinely wanting to get to know them, learn more about them. Started to develop a really efficient pipeline generation method. So
Mm.
booking calls, getting things moving and moving towards that proposal stage was a lot more consistent. Now, I was thinking to myself, hey, I've developed a pretty specialized service that I don't think a lot of people are doing, let alone know about. With the
Mm.
automation piece, with LinkedIn as an up and coming platform. So I decided I wanted to take my efforts to the public space, right? So I ended up parting ways with the company I was with, started my agency Delta Lead, with the main focus of just bringing certainty and consistency to the pipeline, building those relationships, and helping my clients create expansion in their business. So that's kind of a general overview of where I've been, and we can definitely dive into a bit of what I'm doing now later. But yeah, that's kind of a summary there for sure.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
One piece that I think is important to highlight from what you just shared, Garrett, is the piece about when you started doing the outreach, it was focused on you and your goals and objectives. And over time, you learned to flip the coin on its head. We've talked offline a number of times about that. And it brings to mind Don Miller from StoryBrand, where he talks about positioning the customer as the hero in the story, right? And I think it's probably worthwhile to unpack that thought process a bit further because there is a switch that you have to go through as a service provider and entrepreneur when you're thinking, what's my business model? What are my objectives? How do I go about executing that? And there's this threshold that you cross where the thinking is completely reversed and you're having to speak to that audience. And I'm wondering if you could just position yourself in that moment in time where you were maybe coming up against the wall with that original approach and had
Yeah.
to learn through practice, through trial and error, how to take the other way, the other route.
Yeah, for sure. That's a um, great topic there. So basically, uh, when I was doing a lot of that initial outreach, again, very focused on myself. It was coming really from a place of desperation. I'd say is probably the root of
Mm.
the outreach I was doing. Was hey, I need to close more clients. We need to get more revenue. I need to get more commission. All those sort of thoughts were flowing through my head, and it put me in a state of scarcity, desperation, and really just focused on my needs and how I could satisfy my needs in that sense. Um, Burned a lot of bridges that way. Definitely don't recommend that. Not like it was catastrophic by any means, but it just wasn't very successful. I wasn't getting very good responses, if any at all. Wasn't really booking a lot of discovery calls that'll move towards proposals, and overall, just not a great time. Now, I think it really shifted when it sounds kind of funny, but I just kind of stopped caring about the outcome, and
Mm.
really started to focus with a genuine interest in the other person. Like if I can, if I'm going to ask them to become one of my clients, if I'm going to provide value, they're going to want to provide value to me. um, I want to build a relationship with this person, right? Like you'd think uh, a lot of sales relationships are built that way, but um, I don't think enough people are coming from that perspective. So when I started to shift things towards building that relationship first, that's when I really feel a lot of doors started to open. Not
Mm.
necessarily when I was just focused on closing that deal, getting them as a client, but looking for ways to provide value to them regardless of the outcome. Um, and it turns out, if we fast forward a little bit, a lot of other great opportunities were formed because of that, not just looking at the end goal of my needs, right? Looking how I can help them and then There's ways to reciprocate, and then usually things can turn out a lot better. Um, and what that looked like, we can dive into here more in a little bit, but basically, again, showing a genuine interest in them, something you can't really fake, right? Checking out their profile, looking at what they have going on, asking questions that aren't super surface level, but at the same time aren't super complex, keeping the conversation pretty casual. And again, the main focus, I say again, but the main focus on LinkedIn is really just to sell immediately. You don't want to pitch your services and go in super in detail about what you do and who you serve and all this. People don't really care about what you do. They want to build a relationship with you. They want to get to know you. They want to make sure that you know them to some degree. And then that's where you can start to talk business, at least in my opinion. And that's what's I've seen the most success with. So it's really two different perspectives there. It's almost like a scarcity versus an abundance mindset. And it really just having yourself in that abundant mindset at all times will really um, start to reflect on how you act, the interactions you have, and overall what your future will look like. So hopefully that kind of helps break it down for y'all to understand in that sense.
Hmm. I appreciate you breaking that down further, Garrett.
Absolutely.
It, this may be skipping forward a bit, but it connects to what you're saying about the actually caring about the
Mhm.
people you're reaching out to, identifying, or first seeking to establish the relationship,
Mhm.
build the trust, and that's something you can't fake.
Yeah.
Uh, early, a little bit before that, you're talking about originally you're spending several hours a day sending out connection requests and all of that. That was one piece of it.
Right.
And I think that might be a perception I had originally. I think a number of other people may have a similar perception that cold outreach and networking on
Mhm.
LinkedIn, it is a serious commitment of a sacrifice of time and energy.
Yeah.
Um, and there's smart ways to do it. There's efficient ways to do it. Yeah. And, uh, it just like anything, too much efficiency and automations can be counterproductive.
Yeah.
But I guess if I could frame this question up, how do you think moving into this age that we're in right now, this automation, generative AI space, deep
Mhm.
fake space that we're
Yeah.
just on the precipice of going into, and so many other ways from automations, we're already there. Everyone who has a CEO title or almost any title on their LinkedIn gets just flooded with messages, cold outreach messages that are
Right.
devoid of humanity,
Yeah.
right? And it's just like a full-time job to delete them all or ignore them all. But one
Yeah.
thing that you do and that you have done is help bring that that humanity, that authenticity into it. So how do you do that at scale
Right.
and do it and moving into the age of automation that and AI that we're
Yeah.
moving into, Garrett? How do we do that?
Yeah. Really great question. So to kind of preface things, it can be a very fine line. I'll definitely say that. Um, I think the most important things it comes down to is, like I said before, really just trying to spark a conversation, being genuine in the process. Uh, Not really, there are some people who will, hey, let's like three posts, let's have an automation like three posts and do a comment on them before we even have a chance to chat. That, in my opinion, can start to get a little carried away. And it's really just the main goal of this sort of outreach is, like I was saying, sparking a conversation, really just getting your foot in the door, not talking about yourself, not talking about what you do, really just looking to spark that initial reaction to when then you can personalize and have a great conversation. Because in all reality, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to personalize things at scale. Really, the most you can do is be relatable in that sense and generate some camaraderie in that aspect. Now, a lot of it comes down to the initial list of people that you're targeting, making sure that you've done your due diligence to make sure it's a very targeted list and the people you're reaching out to have, generally the same problem or at least opinion on a certain topic you want to discuss. Uh, but then beyond that, just making sure your messaging is not super focused again on yourself. You do talking about all this stuff being disingenuous, like, hey, I saw you're doing this, when it's just kind of a blanket statement. So keeping things very casual, looking to just spark a conversation. And then once they respond, that's when myself, you as a client, or whoever's responding to that message can come in and give that human touch, that personalization, and spark that relationship. So it's really, like I said, kind of a fine line to balance how much automation can do, because I don't think it will ever, maybe I might be mistaken, but I don't think it will ever replicate, a human to human interaction as authentically as us as we can do, right? But it can definitely help assist you in that process and make it a lot smoother in a way that is a win-win for everybody. So that's really the main goal there, is having it to assist you, save you time, and really, again, just what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of replicate yourself to some degree and really um, exponentialize the process. I'm kind of making up words here, but really just allowing yourself to spark those conversations to when there you can come in, have that connection, create that personalization. So it's a very, I could go into this, quite a bit, but it is a very, again, a very fine line. And it's something I do work on trying to balance every day and try to improve. So that's probably the um, biggest challenge for lead generation companies, I'd say, especially those using automation, is really just finding that natural flow to things.
Yeah. The natural flow of things, it's a daily practice,
Yeah.
art and science. Thinking about the flow, we've had conversations about what happens downstream.
Mm.
You, there's list or lead generation, getting your foot in the door,
Mhm.
setting up an initial networking call, an opportunity just to get to know each other and identify any areas of overlap for value exchange.
Mhm.
But maybe we could go downstream a bit. But before we do, I think you just mentioned about the list and the targeting and how that's
Mm.
a prerequisite. We know that's critical.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody.
Right.
So it's what happens. Help the entrepreneur who hasn't ever done this sort of thing before, but
Yeah.
they know they need to. They've seen a Alex Ramosi video, or they've seen some ad somewhere that's sparked the idea. They've seen this video,
Yeah.
and they know they have to do it.
Mhm.
They hear you, they hear us talking. Yeah, first thing is honing in on who.
Yeah.
If that's upstream of the actual workflow of the activity of doing it, no matter how efficient, whether you're leveraging smart tools or you're doing it the brute force way of
Mhm.
manual labor, swim upstream. What's like the first domino that in your mind that has to be tipped over to cascade the rest?
Yeah. No, great question. I would definitely say having a clear understanding of your target audience, um, really knowing what challenges are, how your services can help them, speaking their language, even as a precursor. I mean, you don't have to know it perfect, but I'd say having experience in a certain industry definitely gives you an edge compared to those who don't. So, and it also at the same time has to come down to a few other things, right? You need to make sure these people you're reaching out to can, I guess, monetarily afford the services you're providing, and it's a win-win for both parties. As well as that, it needs to be make sure that you could help this industry very well, but maybe you just dread talking to these people, and it's an absolute drain on your energy. That's not going to be good either. So, finding a good balance that really works best for your specific situation, depending on your services. Identifying that first, I'd say, is the most crucial piece. Now, when it comes down to how the other dominoes fall, I'd say when you're actually building a list to do sales outreach, that's 70% of the battle. Having that list nailed down. There's a quote from Warren Buffett, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's about it's not really about how hard you're rowing. It's about the boat that you're in. You could
Mm,
be in a kayak full of holes, rowing as hard as you absolutely can, and you'll be going nowhere and sinking. You could be in a speedboat going 100 miles an hour where you barely have to row, right? So having that initial list really nailed down is a super, super big key. And then from there, you're able to start to craft messaging. You're offering, what individuals within these industries you need to be reaching out to. And you can kind of take things from there. Well, we can kind of break that up a little bit later because that can be explaining everything will be a pretty in-depth process. But I'd say definitely the first thing is having a clear understanding of who you want to serve and where they're hanging out, Maybe they're not even on LinkedIn to some degree. Maybe they're on Facebook or Lineable, these other channels. So really finding out how you can get in front of them, I'd say is the first step, or at least the second step to the first step. But hopefully you kind of understand in that sense where most of the impact lies. It's really finding that target audience. I'd say for sure.
Mm. Thank you for breaking that down.
100%.
What haven't we illuminated that we should?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of things will shift. Like the more, again, this might even be a precursor to the domino of finding your target client, but um, it's really putting your attention outward. Like I was alluding to earlier in the call, um, not being in scarcity, not being in desperation, really just looking for opportunities to help the person while at the same time not doing it for free to where you're jeopardizing yourself and such, but doing it in a way to where the value exchange makes sense. And having a lot of those interactions will, one, help you get more reps or sales conversations and connecting with people and building those relationships. But two, really just put yourself in a place to succeed. I think anyone who wants to be successful in sales, business, in my opinion, relationships are the foundation for everything in that world. Um, and really just finding a a good way to connect with other people in a way that's genuine and that isn't forced is really the core of what I feel like I'm trying to do here at Delta Lead. Is really just help people to enable uh, better relationships and overall just create more opportunities for all parties involved in their life. So I'd say that's probably, like I said, the primordial domino there in that case is like your mindset, your energy, your intention has to be there first before you can really even start to consider doing outreach effectively and to where you don't burn any bridges. So
Yes.
yeah, we can definitely dive into that because that comes more down to the individual and their state and what their goals are in life and having clear core objectives. A lot of the stuff that we discuss and you kind of ran me through in your process. Um, but having that foundation is so critical, in my opinion, 100%.
I get that the effectiveness is really based on the individual. But is there any underlying patterns or principles that can be applied across the board?
Yeah. Think about that for a second. So are we talking here more along the lines of kind of best practices for outreach or more?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So big thing is keeping things casual. I have used to say it's more of a catchphrase. I think it's still relevant, but if you've been on LinkedIn for 20 minutes and you've been reached out to by people, you're most likely going to be pitch slap. So my definition of a pitch slap is somebody who sends a 4 to 5 paragraph long message, dropping Calendly links, PDF. Here's all this stuff we do. This is why you need us. Before even saying, hey, great to meet you. How's business going? Right. There's so many steps that are skipped in that process. And it really just kind of blows up any chance you had at interacting with that person on a human to human level. And obviously, for some industries, it might have more pull. I wouldn't say ever send 5 paragraphs talking about all that stuff, but being a bit more forward can definitely work in some scenarios. But I would say a mindset to have when you're doing outreach on LinkedIn, um, is treat it like texting. Treat it like you're texting a friend, sending some casual messages back and forth. Um, and even farther than that, treat it like you're texting to date. You don't know this person, right? Like, even though you can treat them friendly, you really don't know this person. There's going to be a lot of discovery in the process. And there's so many analogies you can draw between dating and sales. And so, if you've ever, for those listeners who've been on Tinder or other dating apps and stuff like that, um, you wouldn't go up to somebody and say, "Hey, like, here, this is my name. Like, I do this. Let's go on a date, and then I'll propose to you after that. Does that sound good?" It's just absolutely just kind of blows things up.
Right.
So taking things slow, I think, is something that, and having that patience, having that delayed gratification is something that people need to take into consideration. But keeping things very casual in your outreach and following up, every 2 to 3 days or so. If you don't get a response, at least in my opinion, from my experience, that's best practices for sure.
Yeah. Take it slow, be concise, keep it casual,
Yeah, for sure.
and have the patience to only ask for one thing at a time. You know,
Yeah,
if it's not, it's like, hi, how are you? Right? It's like an initial connection, not
yeah,
the initial connection and three additional paragraphs and two or three asks after that.
right. Exactly. And it can be very easy to make multiple asks if you're coming from a state of scarcity. It reminds me of when I was with the Amazon agency. Um, I was like, oh, like I want to hit 2 sales this month. We're 5 days out. Like I want to get them on a meeting as soon as possible and close them. So hey, yeah, we do this, we can do that. You want to book link, literally pitch slapping people, right? And it's very easy to get carried away, focused on what you want. But it's not how relationship building works, unfortunately. I'd say fortunately, I'm glad it doesn't work that way, but it's just not how it's going to work.
Yeah.
So yes, having that patience to take things slow and respect their time and respect the business they built and the things that they're doing will take you a long way.
Yeah. Those are helpful best practices. Yeah, I'm reaching for something that's not there, but before we move past this, is there any other tactic, something that someone could practically do, plug and play into their own workflow,
Yeah.
that you've seen be most effective? I'll give it a little more context. We've talked before how the skepticism across platforms, not just on LinkedIn, but the level of distrust for strangers,
Mm,
my view is that it's at an all-time high,
right.
and for good reason.
Right.
But so overcoming that, if you don't have a mutual connection that's facilitated the introduction,
Yeah.
is pretty tricky.
Right.
And standing out on the screen with just letters,
Mm,
that can be tricky because even if your letters are better than others, it's
mm,
right. It's an alphabet competition at the end of the day.
yeah.
So being concise and being casual and only asking for one thing and following up, these are all like really helpful uh, tactics. These are really
Yeah.
helpful best practices. I'm just wondering if there's if I'm reaching for something that's not there, is there
Mm,
something else that you've found that is a pace change that
yeah.
when someone sees it more often than not, it stands out.
Yeah, 100%. And not a reach at all. There's probably many different micro tactics that we can go in a great detail on. But one I want to touch on that I think will have the biggest impact is the icebreaker. It's like, what are you going to say to somebody first? You've built that target list. You've started to send out those connection requests. But how am I going to have a conversation? How am I going to move this interaction from here to them wanting to hop on a call with me? Right.
Mm,
So I'd say there are three main, at least in my world, icebreakers, and we'll kind of cover them in terms of like least riskiest. And when I say risky, I mean the likelihood of somebody responding or not to most riskiest. So
yes.
we're going to talk about the first strategy here. Um, this is about as low pressure as you can get, and it's a great place to start for beginners and people looking to just grow their network and create relationships. And that's just creating, a very gentle icebreaker. This can be a hey, so and so, great to connect. How's business been treating you over the last quarter? Or hey, so and so, I see you're located in X area. Do you like it there? How's the weather been? And it seems like it can be a little bit cliche. You can definitely tweak this gentle icebreaker depending on the industry to be a little more relatable. Again, like I was saying, it can be difficult to personalize at scale. Obviously, a personalized manual message is going to go the longest, in my opinion. But if you are going to take this approach with automation, keeping things as low pressure, at least in the beginning, will have the best results. So that's the first method that I recommend. And what that conversation looks like moving forward, have a couple back and forth, a little bit of trust building, getting to know each other, and say something like, "Hey, I really enjoyed our conversation so far. It'd be great to get to know you more over a quick call. Is that something you'd be interested in?" And coming from a genuine place, like we were discussing earlier, is really important. Can't just say, "It'd be great to get on a call to get to know you," and then as soon as they hop on, start pitching. That's just not how it works. So I usually always have a discovery process in the beginning, just a discovery call, asking questions, getting to know the person. What are their interests? What are they doing with their business? All that good stuff before we would move things towards sales. So that's the first method I'd say, and kind of what that branch looks like. Second, is it can be fun. So it's coming from the place of a provocative, relatable question. So this is really going to be industry specific and will depend on who you're reaching out to and even who they are within a certain company.
Mm.
So a couple examples of what this might look like is, hey, AI has been blowing the world up or whatever. What are what are your thoughts on it? Are you going to stay on more the manual side, or are you going to fully embrace the AI revolution or whatever people are calling it? Now, there's another approach you can take. For example, another example would be um, when I was reaching out to SaaS a while
That's a
back.
good one.
Yeah, thank you. That is a pretty good one. But yeah. So when I was reaching out to SaaS a while back, one of the things I noticed from just talking to a few people, there was a lot of distrust between salespeople and like SaaS executives and SaaS developers. Just not a lot of meshing of personalities, I think, is might would have come down to, and then salespeople can tend to overpromise. So really diving into that on the initial conversation had some great results. It's like, hey, like there's some tension, at least from what I've noticed, between sales and SaaS developers. Like, would you care to kind of explain that for me? And like genuinely, I was curious about their opinion, right? I wanted to learn more. And that was a great way to get my foot in the door while at the same time diving into their pain, knowing not what to do, right? So this approach, if crafted properly, the provocative, relatable question can really take you far. You can have it set up in a way to where this person is giving you a passionate, emotionally charged response that creates a really great conversation, and is a really good first interaction that can lead to a great further call. Um, so I'd say that's the second approach there, right? And the process after that, for the most part, makes sense if you're able to dive into what their pain is, you're able to at least understand it, know what they don't want, right? And then kind of dive into how you can help them, not necessarily directly, but just doing it in a way that is tactful. Maybe that's the right word I'm looking for. So
Mm.
that's kind of how that branch goes from that path. Now, third and final approach is going to be like a polite, confident, direct ask. So I'd say this one, like I said, is probably the riskiest. It really depends on what industry you're in and how effective it's going to be. But this is just straight up going, hey, like, my name is so and so. I specialize in X service. Um, you want to grab some time to chat? And this can absolutely work for industries like real estate, maybe in financial advisors to some degree, maybe consultants, depending on how you angle it, what type of person you are, and making sure that it fits your voice naturally. This can work very, very well, but can also burn a lot of bridges because you're basically you're skipping all that relationship building over the messaging and going straight for the ask of their time, their energy. So in turn, you might receive some more no's in that sense, but yeah, like I said, depending on your voice, who you are, how you pitch it up, it can be a very nice process because not only are you already providing value to them by telling them what you do to some degree, not in a way that's pitching, but like you're giving them an understanding of what you do so they're not going in blind. You're also having that first call and getting on that interaction pretty much ASAP. But again, can be a little riskier in that process. So those are the three main methods I like to go to, and we'll kind of tweak things depending on the client I'm working with and their voice and um, in their industry is probably the most important factor there. But um, yeah, that's kind of a breakdown of the icebreaker for sure because that's you do the list building, you can handle the messages after you have a conversation started, but like how do you start that conversation? I think that's where so many people can get stuck, it's like not knowing how to there's so many options. You can get analysis paralysis, but it's really looking for the best way to move forward and provide value and create that relationship. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Impressive. Very impressive.
thank you. And it's a great time exploring that process with you as well. That was really, really great time.
Likewise. Very enlightening and helpful to have you as a guide through that process. I'm putting myself in the position of someone hearing you share all of this. Perhaps it's the first time they've heard it and feeling like that would be very overwhelming to do on my own without the guide.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be.
Something I've shared with you a few times over the last quarter is that working together is a catalyst for growth. How many we could sit down with 100 business owners and talk about traffic generation, lead generation, customer acquisition. We could have a conversation about that within the context of what we're talking about now. And I would wager the majority of them, if not all of them, I specifically in B2B space, would recognize that cold outreach on LinkedIn via email has merits. In fact, it's a very high leverage, high impact activity. It generates results more than just a return on investment from a
Mhm,
financial standpoint, but the insights into who you believe your target market is
mhm.
and the way that they understand their problems and their solution seeking behavior.
Yeah,
The, and the insights that you can gain in addition to the financial outcomes and the social networking outcomes, the expansion of your network, there's multiple levels of benefit
mm,
that are self-evident for business
yes.
owners. They know that they have to do it,
Yeah,
right? And they hear an expert like yourself talking about it and think, "Wow,
mm,
that's what I want.
yeah,
That's what I need."
yeah,
Uh, but doing it on their own, you talk about Hormozzi's value equation. I love that. The
mm,
time delay is
yeah,
great. It's like, man, the amount of time it would take me to rewatch what Garrett just broke down with the three different icebreakers. I got to know who I
yeah,
am and which
mm,
one fits with, there's like
yeah,
dozens of variables to all of that.
yeah,
And the effort and sacrifice and time delay to do that on your own is immense, such to the
right,
point that it's especially combine that with many business owners are tight on time as it is
right. Yeah,
and are suffering from decision-making fatigue and limited bandwidth to work on the business,
yep,
in this capacity. And I know we're talking about both things, but building out your list or your target market, structuring the campaigns, I would consider that a lot of working on an
yeah,
aspect of the business
sure,
that is a prerequisites to working in it, running through the activities of lead generation.
right.
So how do people take the next steps to condense their learning curve from
Yeah,
years and spending the untold fortunes required that those years or at the very least months would take them to do it on their own? How do
right.
they condense all of that and and have the catalyst?
Yeah, really good question. So, first step um, in this process, I would say, is having empathy, understanding what the person you're reaching out to values. This is kind of touches on what I was discussing earlier, is like speaking their language, knowing what keeps them up at night, knowing what scares them, knowing what services they value, really understanding them to some degree better than they understand themselves. And that can, I'm sure y'all have heard that before in many phrases, but it really just comes down to, um, knowing this type of individual you're reaching out to and uh, just knowing what they need, right? And that, I think that definitely takes some empathy and understanding and definitely some time to study. So, whether it be looking stuff up on your own, having a nice chat with Chat GPT, that can really uncover um, some great insight into whatever industry you're reaching into. So that's something I've done extensively is just had conversations with Chat about, hey, like, what is this target audience? What do they need? What are their main struggles? And, chat's not going to be perfect. Don't use that as your only source. It's kind of like I'm a doctor here prescribing, but we're still at the same time, it can be a great, great resource. Now, once you have that general understanding, it really comes down to then understanding yourself. So, like, what type of person am I? Am I somebody who's like some people, the polite, confident, direct approach just might not fly with who they are. Maybe it doesn't feel natural to them. Kind of going with one of those and pairing it with the services you do in the industry you're serving and seeing what might be a good fit. And I say a good way to kind of test that would just be split testing, right? Try
Mm.
try the gentle approach and then try the provocative, relatable question, reaching out to the same industry, comparing your results from there, seeing where the conversations go, eventually tracking how those deals close. That can be a great process. And to some degree, there really is no way to get around that iteration phase of really learning and understanding and tweaking and adjusting. And um,
Mm.
most likely you're not going to hit it out of the park on the first try. Now, the last piece of advice I would say for this is starting small. Can't just expect yourself to go in there and hop in and do 200 follow-ups, 200 outreach messages, and just, you're probably going to burn yourself out. You need to give yourself a little bit of grace. So, uh, I talk about this a lot in relation to working out, waking up in the morning, creating any good habit you want to. It's really about creating that winner effect, starting small, conquering that objective, making that goal a little bit bigger the next day, conquering it in a way to where you're not setting an expectation super high. You don't meet it, then you're hard on yourself. You want to give up. You're not good enough. It really just isn't going to prime yourself for success.
Mm.
So this is something you're going to have to stay committed to, but it doesn't have to be difficult. There are going to be a lot of small, very easy to do tasks that might look big on paper, but when you break it down and segment it into daily tasks, hourly tasks, becomes a lot easier to digest. So
Yes.
hopefully that's kind of a little simple guide to at least get you started.
Very helpful. Thank you for breaking that down.
Absolutely.
You've done a masterful job at in my view, at highlighting the method. And there's a lot that still, we could probably have a number of hours of discussion breaking down the details, but I think
Oh yeah.
from a higher level overview, you've done
Mhm.
a great job covering the broad strokes of much of the process. And I think that the you're, in my view, having worked with you for a while now and hearing what you're sharing on this call, your integrity and professional character are very much on display for those watching. And you're a value first kind of a guy,
Mm,
and giving away, quote unquote, the method
mm,
transparently. That's
mhm,
something you don't see um, all over the place. It's not a common virtue. I think
mhm,
a lot of people, you've talked about the scarcity and abundance mindset,
mm.
and you're a living example of that. Being willing to share transparently for the larger community of entrepreneurs what's worked, what hasn't worked, to be vulnerable and talk about trials and errors in the past that have led you to the conclusion, the breakthroughs that
Yeah.
this point of success. And to that end, Garrett, there's a saying that goes, "Give away the method, sell the implementation." And it's the method in and of itself. We spend almost 45 minutes just covering the big ideas of the method.
Mhm.
And there's levels, dimensions underneath of that of nuance that have to be corrected and pivoted.
Yeah.
Even the best, out, the best modeling out of the gates has to change.
Yeah.
Uh, and you've hit on that. It's an iterative cycle. It's a practice that has to evolve over time through learning and insight.
Mhm.
Um, if someone wants to, so before I get to that, I guess what I'm saying is, not only are you generous in sharing your point of view as an expert here, I know that you also meet with a number of people in this space for just to connect with them and to have these one-on-one conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like a strategy session or a discovery call, for example, I know that that's a way people watching this thinking, man, I wish Garrett could help break this down a little further for me, or I would really love support from Garrett on the
Yeah.
implementation of this. They can, you're not behind the ice wall. You're very accessible.
Yeah.
It's something, you're someone that people can connect to very easily.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think I'm always open to having and really thoroughly enjoy. It might be selfish on my end, but I really do thoroughly enjoy these conversations and explaining the process and helping people um, have more options than they thought they had. I suppose is probably the best way to put it. But yeah, absolutely, a big part. I with my content, the conversations I have, uh, a lot of what I do is out there. But you're absolutely right. When it comes down to it, people have time, and that dedicating that time to develop their own skill is something people might want to do, but again, they may not have the time to do it. So in those cases, working together in that capacity to do it with them, do it for them, is absolutely where things can go. But um, for me, knowing that I can provide value to somebody and even seeing the results they get and the positive reactions is very fulfilling to me. As selfish as that sounds, it really is something that I have um, a lot of joy in doing. And yeah, and on that note as well, for anybody interested, I have discovery call links on my page. And if anyone is interested in having a conversation about this stuff, whether it be the level that Logan and I discuss, or whether it be very surface level where I get started, this is my exact situation. That is absolutely something I'd love to dive into with you and get to know you better as an individual, as well as how I can provide value to you as well. So doors are open. It'd be great to have a chat with you all. And for anybody in Logan's audience, I know Logan's a very stoic, well spoken man, and having the opportunity to meet others like him would be a pleasure.
Right on. I appreciate you just taking the time out of your week to break that down for us and walk us through that. If you're watching this and you want to realize what we've talked about for yourself and implement the method that Garrett's broken down, I highly recommend you follow through with his offer. Go to Garrett's LinkedIn profile, book a discovery call with him, and just connect. It'll be worth your time. At the very least, the insights that he'll provide will move the needle for you. But you cross the threshold into implementation support, and it'll change the game entirely. Garrett, my friend, been a pleasure connecting with you today.
Absolutely. You as well. Really enjoyed our time. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, my friend. I'll see you in the next one.
Have a good one. Take care, all.
You too.